touting her, our ace first officer and chief technical officer. And boy, do we need him with Zoom and the way it works. And down in my lower left, got Diane Hansen, a newly ordained flight attendant after realizing years of a dream of doing that, and newly retired Eric Larson over there on the other side. So we're all practicing safe social distancing. I hope you're doing the same. We actually led this. We've been doing this for 3 years. So, little humor, very little humor.
I wanna use this confusion for 2 quick shout outs to our Birds of a Feather members. First of all, Mary McKillop, happy birthday to you.
Oh, Mary, yeah,
Mary
way to go.
is, not only a member in our Birds of a Feather Facebook group, but also graduated from our Cleared for Takeoff 201 online course. And I'm not sure if you are seeing this, if you're watching, but I hope that you're well. And also happy belated birthday to Elaine Nadalin, our Fearless Flight volunteer. Yeah, I think your birthday was yesterday. So happy birthday to you.
Okay.
So Elaine and Mary, I'll interrupt Dieter, but statistics show the people with the most birthdays live the longest. So you're on the right track.
Yes, keep it going.
Yeah, very good. Okay.
Well, my mom just had her 95th here in the middle of last month. So far that's held true. So I'm trying to ride her genetic coattails. So. Okay, and speaking of Birds of a Feather, we want to invite everybody to join Birds of a Feather if you have not. Not only will you get all the information about fear of flying, but it's a great place to tell your story and help other people. It's a very altruistic group, and we all join in and comment, helping and supporting other people there. So you can follow the link down there, and we encourage you to keep the numbers growing. So thanks a lot for your past support. And,
actually, Ron, I just want to make sure that if you're not a member yet and you're watching this live, or maybe in the next few hours or days, we're experiencing some issues with one of our domains.
Yeah.
So instead, I am going to also put the link in the comments directly to our Facebook group, because we've had some issues lately. And
okay.
Yeah.
Good point. Good point. And you'll know, because if you use a link with FLF link in there, it's giving you a 404, a dreaded 404 area. So, okay, tonight, poll question. Should I have the right, you'll see it by the end of this, you'll know why we chose this poll question. Should I have the right to insist that another passenger wear his or her flight mask during the flight? Should you have the right to tell somebody else, hey, you gotta wear your mask, or at least report it to the flight attendant to see if you can get compliance? So we'll be beating that issue all up tonight. And we're going to talk about a related issue, just a little bit more about the brain tonight during the coaching corner. And then we've got some incidents. Everything is tied to this whole thing about wearing a mask. And so we're glad y'all came, and we'll get right into it. So you might remember we had some past discussions about 2 processes in the brain. And if you were to slice your head open and look at your brain, you're not going to see 2 brains. You're not going to see 1 brain, but there are 2 processes there. And I've asked you from time to time as an example, if I say, how much is 2 and 2, you would say 4. If I say, how much is 24 times 17, you would say, let me get back to you on that, okay? And those are living proof of what the 2 systems are and how they function. So 2 plus 2, our brain made a decision that it wants a shortcut. So once it learned how to add, it took the process and it took the answer and it parked it in system 1. System 1 is that term comes from a noted psychologist named Daniel Kahneman, who wrote a book called Thinking Fast and Slow, which is based upon his work studying the issues we call social psychology and how the brain works, and for which he was awarded a Nobel Prize back in 2002. And it was pretty amazing in the fact that that there is no Nobel Prize for psychology, and he had never taken an economics course in his life. But the contribution, a big part of the contribution was to economics and how we make money decisions. And just a quick review there. System 1, you can see there, we got the little elephant up there, because the elephant represents the fact that the massive size of an elephant relative to our little eagle, which is our mascot over there in System 2. The elephant represents how large a proportion of decisions and thinking System 1 does. About 95%, you can see there at the bottom. The other decisions are relegated to System 2, and they account for about 5% of that. And the things in System 1 that we typically think about, it is, that you can see listed out there. System 1 is fast and automatic, always looking for shortcuts. Remember that, because we'll probably go back to that later on tonight. It's sometimes referred to the emotional brain. Keep that in mind also as we talk about some of the issues that have come up this week. System 2, on the other hand, is slow and deliberate and rational, and the opposite of emotional. It's calm, it's collected, it's deliberate, and it's the one that's likely to prevent poor decisions and judgments. And it takes data, it likes data, and it likes time to process that. So they have two different roles when you look at them. If we got the next one, System 1, or our elephant brain, as we sometimes refer to it, it's really great in a crisis. It's our best chance. It may make an incorrect decision, but it does make give us our best chance. It's where our creativity comes from. It helps us complete repetitive tasks, jumps to conclusions fast. That wouldn't be such a positive thing. And it's prone to poor judgments. I shouldn't perhaps say prone in the sense that it's more likely to make poor judgments, but when we make poor judgments, it's often the culprit there. System 2, on the other hand, we've already talked about it being slow and deliberate. And it's where we make our risk benefits analysis, where we do our deductive reasoning. We have some of our higher brain functions, logic, math, abstract concepts. Takes time, and my camera's hiding it, and it requires focused attention there. So those are the things I want you to keep in mind, because they're automatic. They're built in. There's something we inherit. We're born into them, and we largely don't have an alternative. We can't stop one or the other, or particularly the elephant brain, from generating an emotional reaction. Our goal is to change our response and get out of our autopilot, which you'll hear me refer to. So if you want to put the next one up there, if you listen to our Putting Mindfulness into Practice 101 webinar, you know that we talked about 6 basic emotions. Now there's I've got a wheel that I'll show some week that has, literally hundreds of emotions, but they're all categorized in 6 basic categories. And they are sad, glad, mad, afraid, shame, and disgust. And if you look at those, you'll find it interesting, or at least I do, that it's no coincidence that there's 1 positive and 5 negative. And I'm not being pejorative, I'm not being prejudiced against the negative ones. They just happen to be more negative. In other words, we don't like to think about those as much. We don't like to deal with those as much. And if you were here last week, or you've seen the replay, you know that we talked about that when we talked about how habits form. And habits for good emotions or positive emotions form the same way they do for negative emotions. We go back to them and form memories around them. It's just that we don't have the consequences associated with positive emotions that we do with negative ones. So we tend to avoid those. And then moving on in that same line of thinking, Dieter went in and did some research for our past clients there, and he looked through thousands of clients and data that we had from them. And for our purposes here, these are the 5 prevalent emotions that were expressed in there: anxiety, embarrassment, helplessness, shame, and overwhelm. And you can see those are generally, shame is the one that is named in the previous category, but these are all variations of the other negative emotions there. And when you look at those, they're all negative. So I like to point out that it's no coincidence that the negative emotions happen more prevalent than the positive ones, because they're geared towards survival. So we are biased towards negative emotions because that's what's going to keep our fat out of the fire and keep us alive. And that's what our ancestors realized over the years. And
is that what's wrong with Ron? Is that what's wrong with all the guys we flew with for decades except for us? They're just freaking negative. I can't believe it.
No doubt.
Okay, sorry. Keep going.
We shall leave that subject for another date. So
okay.
And in all fairness, I do just want to make this little add-on. It is unlikely that a fearful flyer, when asked about airplanes and flying, that they're gonna report a lot of positive emotions. So,
yeah, right.
So what these 5 represent are really truly the 5 most commonly shared emotions of fearful flyers, and that's really, you know, that's really what this slide is talking about. Just make
sorry. Good stop.
So when you talk, the whole purpose of emotions in the human being is to trigger feelings and command your attention. We've talked about fear of flying really is an attention disorder. It's when your attention gets hijacked and you can't put it off, or at least you don't feel like you have the capability of moving it to something else that's less threatening to you. But that is the goal. That's why we talk about mindfulness. Mindfulness in one form, shape, or another is the primary tool that you will use when you overcome it, whether you acknowledge it or whether you're even aware of it. So, and with the presence of any emotions, these emotions, cognitive skills, the negative ones that is, cognitive skills and functions decrease. You don't have a choice in that. When you are elevated, when you are aroused, and you're in any one of those 5 that Dieter had up on the screen there, you are doomed. You are not doomed, I won't say, but you are subject to having a decline in your cognitive capacity and your ability to regulate and manage your feelings there. So keep that in mind as we move into the aviation news update here.
And scientifically speaking, you lose between 10 and 20 percentage points on your IQ, right? So if we're in the, it's because what does the body really think it needs to be doing? It needs to be surviving. Right. And so it pumps everything into, you know, these the sympathetic nervous system. Right. And we're not using higher brain functions at that point.
Yeah. So I was going to talk in similar vein tonight, but I didn't have to look too far when I started out here for examples of this out there this week. Of course, what's dominating the news is the COVID-19 and face masks, and it did that this week again. We had Allegiant serves the Phoenix market here, and they had a passenger this week that was escorted off the plane after he and another man who asked him to follow the rules got into a physical altercation. We tried to play this video. I just wanted you to see, it's only like 5 seconds. And if Dieter can get it up and running, he gets a gold star. But at the very least, I wanted to show you, just imagine you're the lady who took this video. She said in there, she got up as soon as this thing got tripped. I don't know how long, it didn't take very long. Apparently they were still at the gate. She bailed. She got up and went to the front of the airplane to get as far away from these 2 yokels as she could, and they of course in this age got her camera out and videoed it for us all. But she said that she was sitting next to one or the other of them, and they were headed for Provo out of Phoenix here, and she like I said, she ran to the front of the airplane. And so she could get out of the way. And she said the fight began when a man sitting behind her started arguing with a flight attendant after she asked him to wear a mask. He was wearing a face shield, but face shields must be worn in addition to a face covering, not as an alternative. So,
all right,
so
let me try and,
okay, right,
and
give it a
see.
whirl. Yeah, pretty good.
Yeah, good job, Dieter.
I can't even imagine what it would be like. I mean, you see the people in the back all going like,
Yeah.
what?
It's not, I mean, it's absolutely upsetting to just watch that in the video form, let alone if you were one of the people right close by there. And that's called contagion. And there is emotional contagion. You know, we pick up on other people's fears. That's why you watch the flight attendant to see if she's calm or nervous when you go through turbulence and all that. And it affects everybody. But think back on what we were talking about earlier about emotions and about the brain and how it works. I can guarantee you, and I'm not excusing anybody's behavior, but what's going on during times like that is that people are making decisions with their elephant brain, and they're not stopping, taking a breath. That's where the old phrase, I think, counting to 10 comes from, literally to engage your rider brain, your system too, so that you can try to do that. So that was one of the—
As sad as that is, Ron, that's almost one flight on one airline every day anymore.
Sure.
Or close.
Sure. Yeah.
Somewhere domestically.
And that's why we posed the question to you all: should you have a right to demand someone obey the rules? And the fight looks like that, at least the limited amount of details that I read in this article here, it really started with the flight attendant challenging the person, and then another passenger backing up the flight attendant. I don't know, I wasn't there, but that's because she makes mention to the fact that the passenger began to object at the flight attendant's challenging him. And it sounds like the issue was he had a mask. He thought that was all that he needed. Typical elephant brain.
Yeah, he was wearing a face shield. That's my understanding.
Right. A shield, yeah.
A face shield. And on our airline and virtually all the airlines, that's not adequate.
Yeah, apparently on Allegiant. So my point is that's what drives your fear. That's what drives poor decisions. And it sounds like at the very least, he will have some time to reflect on whether that was a quality decision or not, because it doesn't matter what his elephant brain was telling him about the fact, hey, I got this shield over here that should cover all the bases. You know, and again, I'm just amazed at how much our culture is moving in that direction towards allowing your elephant brain to just do whatever it damn well pleases. It's insane. I can tell you, I am not going to mess with a flight attendant, and I worked in the industry for 30 years, you know, or mess with the rules. And so much for that one. It was not a good day for Allegiant apparently yesterday.
Ron, I just want to come in here. For a second. Jim said that he actually reported someone at a Costco, you know, for not wearing a mask, and Susan said, well, the mask really is, you know, all those people that are screaming, yelling, shouting, breathing heavily there in the video, right? I mean, that is just it is so contrary to—
That's paradoxical.
System number 2, right?
Yeah. The very thing that they're protesting, they're rolling, you know, increasing the risk by
absolutely
being, you know, much more aggressive and verbal on that. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So then another Allegiant aircraft. This one was coming out of Florida, it says, and this one was a little bit different. And I was surprised at this one, and I apologize. I'm sure there'll be more detail coming out. This happened when a passenger was sitting there during the pre-flight safety briefing, which is extremely important. And he registered a complaint that the flight attendant, apparently the one in his vicinity, was pulling the mask down, or, you know, he might have been up at the front of the airplane during the flight attendant's attempt to use the PA to make the briefing there. And he took exception to that. And he took it to a level that garnered enough attention on behalf of the gate agent and the captain there, and they removed him from the airplane. And interestingly, it says in the article that the passengers around him seemed to be taking the case of him and defending him somewhat. And again, I don't know because I wasn't there and don't have all that information. But nonetheless, you know, at face value, oh my gosh! I mean, when the flight attendants are making their PA, first of all, they got to have two hands, you know, to work all this stuff there. But if they're using the PA, you've got to have a hand available for the PA because they don't wear headsets or anything. Maybe they'll go to wireless headsets. I don't know. Not likely. But anyway, so this seems really, really, I don't know, you, Eric and Diane, I mean, doesn't this seem a little bit counterintuitive?
Well, yeah, we're required to wear a mask, obviously, all the time. But for us anyway, it's optional when we are giving our PA announcements, because we have 2 flight attendants in our aircraft, almost all the aircraft. And so the aft flight attendant is doing the announcements for the safety briefing while the forward flight attendant is doing the demonstration. And we have the option, if we wish, to remove our face covering during the period of time when we are giving our announcement. Part of that has to do with the PA systems aren't always, we're not talking the world's most amazing systems. And so to make our announcements clear so that the passengers have the best opportunity to understand them, not that they're paying attention, but at least to understand them, I always remove my mask when I'm giving my announcement. And the forward flight attendant on our aircraft, on my airline, gives a couple of announcements during the boarding process, and he or she may or may not remove their mask, and they usually do. I'm just saying that, but they usually do it out of sight. They do it in the galleys, so they're not even in view of the passengers. And when I'm doing this 4 or 5 minute announcement that I give, I'm in the aft part of the aircraft, and everybody else is all the passengers are facing forward. So we're trying to do it so you can at least have the best chance of understanding what we're saying. And that's, you know, that's kind of a simple thing. And so for this passenger to complain kind of is, it's becoming very difficult in this particular issue for us flight attendants. I just kind of
choose your battles wisely. You know, and related to the quality of the audio, I mean, that's always been a problem. I think now in the Airbus, finally they've given control to the volume adjustment. I believe, Eric, you can back me up on this. Like on a 320, they can control the volume of the PA in the back, I think, can't they?
Amazingly enough, I don't know, and I don't even remember forgetting that. But I hope so.
The Boeing 730. I don't know on the new Boeings, but this all the way up to through the 400 models on the 737. The only way we couldn't even tweak the volume in the front. Yeah. The only way you could tweak it was to climb down in the E&E compartment or
maintenance function. Exactly.
Yeah. And we have no control at all over the volume. Just depends on how loud you are. And keep in mind, a good portion of the announcements, for example, the safety announcement that we're giving, that when we're aft, the flight attendants, the aft is doing that particularly long announcement, is the engines are spooling up. I mean, it's hard to hear everything. And so to add the mask to muffle the sound.
Yeah. I mean, everybody's had experience where you're talking to somebody and they can't hear you through the mask.
It's just the opposite of being clear during the safety briefing. So for example, when I do the briefing for the exit row, when I say, are you still willing and able to assist in the event of an emergency, I need a verbal yes or no that I can hear. Yeah. And so I point at each passenger because otherwise I can't hear them.
And for me, the whole quality of the audio system goes back to when I was coming back from Vietnam. You could go online, well, not in those days, but you could go to the base exchange and get a stereo system that would blow you away literally and had the highest quality. And yet when you got near an airplane, it was something like they went down to Radio Shack and jury rigged it. You know, it was just incredible how low quality they were in the airplane there, at least the speakers there. Okay, So the last issue here is the headline here says, why could you be kicked off a flight for ignoring the safety briefing? And we wanted to talk about this. This picture came from the article there, and it wasn't over this person's behavior. They just use this for emphasis in that. I know I do. I sleep through the safety briefings a lot because that's just from years and years of practice on an airplane. But they wanted to point out how important the safety briefing is. And we had one of our faithful followers, Shally, bless her heart, sent me a video, and I had not seen this one before. And anyway, and we were not able to put that up yet, but we'll find it. We'll get a link to it and put it up in the cloud somewhere and give you the link to it. So you'll want to do that. Now, as a warning, when you listen to this, it's done by a pilot, and it's tongue in cheek to the extent that he's using a lot of pilot jargon and pilot mentality when he says it. Very direct. There's a couple of curse words in it. I think it's something that you'll weather. But what we want you to do is we want you to be impressed with the fact of the things that he talks about in there are no kidding serious items that why you should pay attention to the safety briefing. And at the risk of terrifying all of you and having all of you turn us off right now, I'm gonna let you know what I did on takeoff. The one time when I wanted to be as much in the present moment as I would possibly be, second only to landing maybe, was during takeoff. And as I got more and more experience and into my career, what I found myself doing on takeoff was looking at the engine instruments that were relevant during the takeoff roll, the airspeed, which is relevant, and outside to make sure that I'm still on the runway. And I would literally, in my mind, I would dare one of those engines to quit, because that's the most challenging thing during that phase of flight. And the reason I did that, I of course wasn't serious, but I wanted to be in that moment no less than if I was in the simulator and they're throwing those things at me. So that's just something that I did as a personal technique. And I would like to invite you all to do something similar. I'm going to use kind of a graphic example. I want you to imagine that from the time you release brakes and you're rolling down the runway, for whatever other anxiety you might have, before you do that, I want you to imagine when you're listening to the pre-flight safety instructions that in a very short period of time, you could be off the runway in a very, very uncomfortable position, maybe even upside down in the airplane, hanging from your seatbelt. I want you to think about that when you're listening to the safety brief, because at that point, your entire world, remember what I said, when you're overwhelmed, your cognitive skills go down. Dieter added that your IQ goes down. You want to be, that's why we practice and are required to practice regularly, whether you're a flight attendant or a pilot, to do all the things that could be really critical and require all of our resources in a short period of time, because they want us to automatically switch into a mode where we've rehearsed this in our mind. So I'm not suggesting that you need to be any more anxious or whatever on there. I'm just asking that you start leaning into the safety briefing a little bit and paying attention. One of the most important things is to look for the safety exits, and not only the ones that are in front of you, but the closest one may be right behind you. And most of the airlines brief that. So I would like
Ron, let me interrupt you for 15 seconds. I don't know when you're going to take a breath, and that's beautiful. I just want to put in caps on that. That was a great explanation of the safety briefing and why it's so important. And one of your Frontier buddies, so not new Frontier, old Frontier, had an excellent line that I always remember from training in a Czech Airman. You don't get to choose when your emergency happens.
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, really? That's so unfair. But nevertheless, you don't get to choose when your emergency happens. Press on. That's all I had.
When we're taking off, when we're sitting, the flight attendants in our jump seats in forward and aft, in my company, and I'm sure every single flight attendant has this maybe a slightly different approach, but we take our positions, we take our brace positions, which are very specific, and then we are required to do something. We review what we call CLUE, the commands, the lights, the usable exits and people and emergency equipment. So every single time we get ready to roll or we are preparing to land, basically what I do is mentally I pick an emergency. What will happen if this goes south? And so if you look at a flight attendant and they are absolutely concentrated, they're not making a shopping list. They are thinking, if XYZ happens, what am I going to say? Because we are required to say certain things verbatim. What am I going to say? What am I going to do? Where's my flashlight? All of those things, we do that every single time we take off in preparation for takeoff and landing. So you guys up front are doing it, and the flight attendants in the back. We are preparing for the worst case scenario.
So, and reflecting back to the first part of your lecture, Ron, with the primary brain, the secondary brain, or whichever half was whichever half, we've talked about time compression and takeoff mode. Time is extremely compressed. And so there isn't time to think through that stuff. Those decisions have to have already been made. Whereas at cruise or landing, we have all that time and all those options and all that extra airplane energy. We have a lot more time and options available to us than takeoff.
And that and other measures and practices are the reasons that we earned the position of being the safest way to travel on the planet, even over walking. The one thing that I want to add in closing here is one of my passions was I got to work in a program called Human Factors. And oftentimes, some of the issues that came up were two pilots flying together, as Eric alluded to earlier in the show tonight. And that is, you're sitting 3 feet away from a guy that you've never met prior to 30 minutes before you get together. And you're expected to operate to the highest degree of professionalism that might be required in possibly a life-threatening situation. And it's no discredit or disparaging remarks against any particular pilots, but there are different styles, and what makes a pilot a good pilot in many cases are his analytical skills, and it's almost at the expense of his social skills sometimes. So we would have people that didn't always mesh together up there. And on the other side of that, I would see when I'd get done with all my pre-flight up front, sometimes I'd get out of the cockpit and then I would always walk through the cabin just before we close the door. But as I was standing there watching the last people to board the airplane, oftentimes, typically the overhead bins on a full flight would get filled up. And it was always interesting to watch one flight attendant versus another. One flight attendant would, when she became aware that we could not take any more baggage on board and had to check it, she might say something like, "Okay, you're going to have to check that," and that would be the end of her remarks. Compared to another flight attendant who would say, "Hey, sir, let me tag your bag," and so you won't have to worry about that. And until we get better at that in managing our own demeanor and our own personalities and stuff like that, we're going to probably have an increase, with the COVID-19 and all that. So I'd like
talked about contagion. That seems like a perfect segue. It's in psychology, we call it emotional contagion, and that goes from positive and negative emotions. And if you learn to deliberately, right, just almost like what we love about actors is really good actors anyways, is that they become seemingly what it is that the role requires them to portray. And so we can actually project that as well. Just like shame, we're trying to put shame around us so nobody notices, right? And yet someone like Diane, who is, a very kind-hearted and attentive person, will spot you and probably put your hand on you and say, "Hey, honey, it's okay," right? And so that's the kind of difference that Ron is talking about. And in the human factors training, for pilots and stuff, but the same goes for fearful flyers. There is a path to managing your emotions, managing your thoughts, and not just that, but actually replace it with a much healthier and much more empowering dialogue that goes on, which will create a very different experience. And instead of feeling like punching somebody when something triggers, you might have a different reaction to that.
Yeah. And with that, next week we're gonna talk about something else in the psychology realm, and that is called learned helplessness. And I put a subtitle down there: "Nothing I do makes a difference." So one of the complaints by many, if not most of the fearful flyers is the frustration when they hear someone who's giving a testimonial about having gone through Fearless Flight and saying, "Yeah, but they probably weren't as bad as I was." There's this element that many of us have, and not just related to fear of flying. This is what is at the roots of a lot of depression. So you might have a friend that might want to listen to that next week as well. And it's called Learn Helplessness. And we're gonna address that next week. And in the meantime, I'd like to thank all four of the three helpers here, and bid you all to, given a choice of being right or being kind, choose kindness. It works out better in the long run.
Well, something super kind for Eric. Captain Eric, you got a comment there from Susan saying that your new look suits you well.
Oh, I don't think I can. I got my hat, my son. I don't think I can come over to my brothers all the time. There'll be lease fees. I mean, yeah, it'll be. But thank you anyway.
Yeah,
very much.
I'm curious, Dieter, with the poll question, did people fall on one side or the other?
Almost 100% of the people that answered our poll question said absolutely. So yes, absolutely. I should have the right to insist to,
Sure,
to do that and
kept
kind of,
safe.
Right. Along with that, I don't want to be, none of us wants to be the mask police on the airplane. We really don't want to be the mask police. I mean, we have enough things that we have going on, but certainly if you as a passenger, you have a concern, what we recommend, please don't do a direct confrontation. Bring it up to the flight attendant. And if there is a continual problem, particularly if it's right at the gate, we will engage the pilots, Eric and Ron, because there is a bit more authority. The captain of the plane is the boss, as these two fellows know, and what they say goes. And if they don't want someone on an aircraft, we can recommend. It's usually a combined decision, but don't kind of confront another passenger directly. Bring it up to us so we can do the best we can, at least in de-escalating the issue.
Good job, Dee. You probably just saved 50% of next week's airplane fist fighting right there. What are they going to watch on YouTube? You're not helping anything.
Stick with
exactly
us.
Right.
Stick with us, and we'll teach you how to groom your elephant.
Yes.
All right. So that's it. I can't top that. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next week. Stay safe and be kind.